This conference will now be recorded.
Kathy is our VP of Professional Services. She's been with NSA for decades. She also one time was in your shoes as a user, actually using a prior version of SX.e. So she understands that side of the fence as well. Kathy, with no further ado, over to you.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to another exciting webinar for our accounting folks. Last month we did a webinar on accounting practices for month end. This one is on year end. If you were not able to attend the one on month end, email us. We can forward you the link to it, or just go to NSA's website. Brian, could you type that into the chat box for folks to see? And anybody who's not muted, please put yourselves on mute so that it doesn't interfere with our session. And feel free to come off mute if you have any questions. Also, as we go, put any questions in the chat box, and Brian will be going through those and posing those as we go. Some questions you may need to come off mute and explain what it is that you're looking for. So without any further ado, our agenda today, one of the things that I like people to know is that this is applicable. I'm getting some feedback. Brian, can you see where the feedback is coming from and perhaps mute that person? That would be swell. Okay, so the processes that we're going to be going through are the same whether you are on-prem, CSD, WebUI, character, graphical, some combination of the above. It doesn't matter. It's all the processes have not changed really. And so this is good to know for folks who are getting ready to go to cloud but are not on cloud perhaps yet. So this is not cloud centric. The screenshots are cloud-based, but that does not mean that what we're talking about is exclusive to CSD. Okay, so I'm showing what the agenda is. We're going to be going through the year-end processes in CSD SX.e. We're going to be going through the recommended report, soft versus hard close, back posting, suspense accounts, balancing the general ledger to subsidiary ledgers, the year-end white paper review, and Brian, can you see who else needs to be muted and perhaps mute them?
Yeah, I don't see anything, but I hear the feedback as well. We may just need to mute everybody, Kathy, and then.
I just did. Can you all hear me? I hope so. Brian, can you put in the chat box if you're able to hear me? Thank you. Appreciate it. So that's much better. I like the thumbs up. Merci. Okay, so the year-end white paper review and then question and answer as we go through. So thank you. There are 4 report style processes to run in CSD SX.e. And they are so simple that people accidentally run them more than once. This is one of those where it is an important thing for security to take away the security to what we call the AY processes so that people do not accidentally run them. I will, after I run through what the 4 of them are about, show you a demo so that you can see why somebody might run it by accident and not even realize that they did. So there's accounts payable year-end, accounts receivable year-end, general ledger year-end, and inventory control year-end. And the next screens I'm going to show you is what it looks like and what the end result is. Run each of these only once. They happen so quickly that people run it, think it's a report, don't even realize they did it, which is why it's important to secure it away from people. Run it only once, ideally when no one else is in the system. Each of those 4 processes will produce a 1-page report. That's it. This is not like, so some folks are coming off of legacy systems where they close down a module at a time. And once that module is closed, it churns out a whole bunch of reports. you know, and moves things over to history and does all sorts of mechanics. With CSD or SX.e, it's just a simple one-page report, and it happens very quickly. It can take seconds to minutes. It doesn't really matter if you run it on the last day of the year or the first day of the new year. So specifically, let's say that not everybody is on the same kind of year. Some of us are running on calendar year, where we start January 1 and our fiscal business year goes through December 31. That's quite a few of us. So that means that we'll be doing our year-end processes either December 31st or January 1st. But there are folks who are running on a fiscal calendar that does not start on those. They may be running on a 445, or they may be running, let's say, I don't know, October to September. So it doesn't really matter if you run these processes on the last day of your current year or on the first day of the new year. What's important is to make sure that you run them before people start posting transactions that will update the general ledger on the first day of the new fiscal year. So this year, I believe we have New Year's Eve on a Thursday, New Year's Day on a Friday, and that means that many people probably won't even be coming into work until the 4th. Having said that, that means you can run this process anytime over the weekend, or you can run it at the end of the day. It doesn't really matter. And again, as I'm going through this, if you have questions, please type them in the chat box. That would be helpful. Yes, okay, that's an excellent question, Michael. If you're keeping the payables open for X amount of days, i.e. calendar year keeps payables open until January 8th, the beautiful thing is that these processes don't actually close the year. They prepare you for starting business in the new year. And as we go through, you'll see what I mean. So the first process we're going to take a look at is APAY. APAY is the administrator year end for accounts payable. And I'm showing you what the ranges and options look like for the report. So if you look here, you see the ranges. So the default is the company. You could run it for multiple companies, but we don't generally recommend that. We recommend that you run it for a company at a time, just out of an abundance of caution. And you can do it for one particular vendor, but that's unusual. That's not usually the way that it's done. Unlike the other reports, the AP year end has another question that says, include 1099 vendors, yes or no, other vendors, yes or no. This is for US companies where the situation is their calendar year and their fiscal year are not both calendar. So their fiscal year might, again, be like I was using the example, October to September, in which case it's not in conjunction with a regular calendar year. So you would say yes to run the 1099 vendors for a year end on December 31st, but not for the rest of your vendors if your calendar year and fiscal year were not the same. The only thing this process does is moves the balances on your vendor from year to date to previous year. That's it. It does not close the AP module. SX.e doesn't work that way. It doesn't close module at a time. So this is one of those things where the process is very simple, and that's all it does. It just moves the vendor year-to-date balances in ESV, the vendor setup, from current year to prior year. If you accidentally run it twice, then as you would imagine to expect, you would come in and you would see the year-to-date balances and previous year balances would both be blank. They both be set to 0 because somebody accidentally set them, ran this twice. When do we see that happen? We see that happen when the system administrator is running these and somebody in accounting runs these, and the two of them did not realize that the other one was doing it. Or somebody set it up as a stored report to kick off and run at midnight, and somebody else ran it, not realizing that. Or somebody is new running these and thinks, oh my goodness, that didn't take very long, it must not have worked, and they run it again. So that's what it'll do. It'll take the year to date and move it into the prior year. And so I'm looking at questions again. If you run invoices at 11 p.m. on the 31st, you need to wait until after the invoices are finished. I would recommend, yes, you do. Wait until all of your processes have completed for the current fiscal year before you do this, because again, it's going to be updating these year-to-date balances. So let's see. I'll show you when we look at the customer one. And I'm going to answer one more question. If I still have vendor invoices to enter, then they will be in the new year balance. Yes, that is correct, because this APAY will move the vendor balances year to date from this year to prior year. So yes, that is accurate. ARAY is the AR year end, and it moves the balances. So I'm going to show you that this one has ranges, but unlike the report before it, it does not have options. So there are no options. It's just what company, what customer. It defaults to the company you're logged into, and it's unusual to run it for just a customer or a range of customers. You generally run them all at once. So when you run this, again, just like the APAY, it moves the year-to-date balances from current year into previous year, and that's it. It doesn't do anything else. It does not close down the AR module. It doesn't move things from a transaction file into a history file. It only updates these. Can you, just so you all know, I'm also looking at the stream of questions that are coming into chat. Can you update more than once when more transactions are needed in the prior year? Well, if you believe that you will be back posting, but not posting to the current year, let's say for the first week, you're going to be posting back into December and you're not posting anything into January, then you can hold off when you run the ARAY, because again, all it does is move the year-to-date balances into previous year. But if you think you're going to be doing a mix, if you're going to be doing some things that are backdated and some things that are current month, then you're just better off letting it, doing the year end for ARAY on the 31st or on the 1st. ICAAY, so this is the Inventory Control Administrator year end. And again, this report has no options, only ranges. And all it does is it clears the year-to-date balance that you'll see in ICSW, not ICSP, that's a typo, that you see in ICSW, or if you're looking in the inquiry, you'll see the balances in ICIP. There is no prior year. It simply zeroes out these counters of issues, also known as sales or whatever year-to-date, receipts year-to-date, returns in from customers year-to-date, returns out to vendors year-to-date. It doesn't move these into a prior year. It just zeroes them out. And I saved the big one. So the big one is the general ledger. So, and this is the one, of course, that makes people the most nervous. It's one thing if you run your year end for those other modules and just zero out the year-to-date tickers. It's quite another to say, what about running my general ledger year end? So the GLAY, general ledger year end, again, it has no options, only a range, and the range is the company. And we recommend, again, that you run this for a company at a time. And in each of the databases, like your test database, production database, any of those that you want to continue to work in throughout the year and not have people get stuck because somebody forgot to do the year ends there. In fact, let me pause for a moment. That's a really good recommendation for people who have not done this before. If you're new to it, we recommend you jump into your test database or training database and run the year-end process there so you can get a benchmark for how long it takes. And you'll be really surprised that it happens very quickly. Again, for some, it'll take only a few seconds, and for some, usually the inventory one takes the longest. It might take a couple of minutes, but it doesn't take long at all. So you run it in each company that you're doing business in, and you run it in each database that you want to advance to the new year so that people can, at the very least, post journal entries. With each of the three that we showed before, the AP year-end, AR year-end, inventory year-end, none of those have to be run. All they do is clear year-to-date tickers. That's just an FYI. but you can process in the new year whether you ran those or not. That's different than GLAY. So GLAY, the general ledger year end, does three things. The first thing it does is it increases the administrator option for the fiscal year by 1. So example would be from 20 to 21. It copies the current year's chart of accounts to the new year, and it takes the forward balances from the current year's asset liability ending balance and moves them into the new year. So this is the one that would prevent people from being able to post into the new year if it isn't done, because the chart of accounts would not exist in the new year. And after this next slide, I'm going to jump in and show you an example of what I mean. So this shows you what the administrator option looks like. And again, all the screenshots are in CSD WebUI, but the process is the same if you're in GUI or character. So GLAY does this. It goes into the financial fiscal year administrator option, and it increases the current fiscal year by 1. So if I moved from 20 to 21, GLAY increases this to 21. And if I have assets and liabilities, it takes the ending balance from 2020 and puts it into the forward balance for 2021. Okay, now I'm going to escape out of this and jump over into CSD. So here I'm going to show you our administrator options before. So I'm going over to administrator options, financials, period structure, fiscal year. So fiscal year, you'll notice, is 2020, and I'm not in a 13 period fiscal year. I'm in a regular fiscal year. I haven't done anything. This is just a regular calendar year. So I want to run my GLAY, but let me show you what happens, or what will happen on January 1 if I don't run this. So I'm going to go into ARET just as a test. It pops open a journal, and I'm going to put in 0120, 010220. Whoops. Nice, Kathy. I cannot get used to 21. I don't know about anybody else. And you'll get this invalid period, right? So that you won't be able to do OE-API. People won't be able to go into OE-ET and tender. Anything that requires a general ledger account, the general ledger does not exist in the new year yet. It's stored in SX.e by year. So until you do your year end, that won't work. Now let me show you one other thing that could impact that. Let me jump back over to my my slide deck. So we'll jump back over there in a moment. So I would also want to make sure if I'm running a 13 period fiscal, so I had showed you one that was just a regular calendar. It was not 13 period, and it started in January. But some of you will have a either a 445 calendar or some other calendar that needs ending dates for the fiscal periods. So in that case, you would not only want to run the GLAY year end, you would also need to then log out, come back in here and fill in the fiscal period ending dates for each of the 13 periods. If you're only using period 13 as an audit clearing location. So for example, let's say that you might have a regular 12 periods, but you want to take any of the audit adjustments and have them not skew December, for example. Then you could put those into a period 13 and have that period 13 have the same ending date as your period 12, as we're showing in this example. So if you have done that year end, you need to remember that the fiscal period dates will not be changed. If you're on a 13 period fiscal year, somebody will need to go in here and manually do that. And one other thing we'll show you before I jump back into showing you a demo is, just as I was showing you test entering a journal, and the example that I used is ARET because that's one of those ones that gives you immediate feedback. So I jump in and to make sure that the year end has worked properly, I opened ARET enter my new fiscal year period and posting date and click OK. If that's fine, then that means people are going to be okay posting into the new year. I like to do this as a safety check. If you get error 2002, which is the invalid period error, which I'll show you again before I log out and back in and do my year-end change, then the first thing you want to do is log out and back in, because sometimes people forget after an administrator option changes, you have to log out and back in for it to take effect. So if I stay logged in after I do GLAY, I'm not going to see the fiscal year change in my administrator option. I have to log out, log back in for that change to take effect. So I put that in there as just a caution for people. But there's another option to check, which is on our financial periods, to see what our first valid and last valid period is. So let's say I did my year end and it's fine. I logged out, I logged back in, but I still can't post. Taking a look at this, where we're looking at our administrator options for period structure. I'm going to zoom in on this for a moment. This last valid period, first valid period, this is saying we cannot post any further in the future than period 12/20, or any further back than January of 20 or period 1 of 20. So we may, if we have it set that way, we would need to remember to also go in and change that last valid period so it's not preventing us from posting into the new year. So that's something that people have a tendency to forget as well. So I'll go back over into SX.e and show us. All right, so I'll show you one more time what that looks like. I go into ARET, which is going to open a journal. And I'm going to say I want to post into January of 21 and 010421, and I'm going to get the error. No. Okay, so now I'm going to run GLAY in real time so that you see what it looks like and what it does, GLAY, and how long it does not take to run. So I'm going to run this as a new one time. I'm not changing the ranges. I'm running it for company 2000. And notice there were no options. It jumps right to the last page. Click Save. Now, I'll refresh, and that's done. Click on Refresh over here, and let's take a look at this. Now, you notice that process did not take very long. So, when this pops open, let's expand it. So in this case, obviously, we've got a small data set. It shows you that 42 accounts were created from in company 2000 to the new year of 21. So now I'm going to log out and back in, and I'm going to try entering in journal again. And this time, it should let me do it without it failing, without me getting that error 2002. So ARET and 0121, 010421, and this time it let me do it. And that's the difference. So you'll see that as a difference. You'll also, as I showed you on the slide deck, see the balance forward being carried out for your assets and liabilities. And now when I go over and look at my general ledger account inquiry, you'll see that the year is defaulting to 2021. So the system is already making the assumption that I want to work in 2021. If I don't want to work on 2021 and I did this by accident, then reach out to me and I can let you know what to do to recover from that. Okay. So that's how you run the test. To make sure that the actual general ledger year end took impact. Okay, I have another question. We're guilty of hanging on to old GL accounts that never get used. What are best practices so they do not move over to the new fiscal year? That's an excellent question. There's one of two choices that I can think of. So I'm going to jump over into the system for a moment, get into GLIA. So GLIA and GLSA, sorry. I want to get into an account setup because I want to show you something that it doesn't have that we want it to have. So in looking at this, something that you do not see, so you see manual posting, but nowhere in here, no matter how hard we look, is there an option to inactivate. There is an enhancement request, an ERS, for accounting to have the ability to inactivate a GL account. We can inactivate a customer, inactivate a vendor, inactivate a product, but we haven't been able to, without a modification, inactivate a general ledger account. So the first thing I would recommend is go out onto the enhancement request site, the ERS site, look for that enhancement request and endorse it. And I would also say, though, until that one comes along, you can go into, if there's no balance on the account, you can go into GLSA and delete the accounts one at a time, or you can use the general ledger function, GLAC, which will allow you to merge a couple of accounts together. So let's say it's got a balance, but you don't want to delete it, but you want to merge it in with another existing, let's say, division. So there's the GLAC function will allow you to merge two accounts with balances and take the history over to the new account. If you have any questions about that, feel free to email me after this presentation. Okie dokie. It can affect, so if that question is, does that affect prior history? The GLAC function allows you to choose just 1 year or a bunch of years. We have some people who use the system that say, you know what, I don't want that account to show up in my, at all. I want it to be merged for the past 3 years or from the beginning of time. So you can say with the GLAC function to merge it for more than 1 year. So for a range of years or for all years. So you don't have to do it just 1 year at a time. Good question. Okay. So now to our recommended reports. So this is one of those in preparation for audit. People forget to do this. And this obviously takes a lot more time than running the year end. I ran the GL year end in front of you, and that took, I mean, obviously we had only 42 accounts, so that took seconds. And in your environment, that may take a couple of minutes, but it happens really quickly. That's the point. Setting up these reports to run out to file or out to email for year end is more time consuming, but it's so worth it. And we'll talk about in a couple minutes why it's important to do it at year end as well as when an auditor is sitting at your desk looking for this. So prior to posting any kind of general ledger, anything that's going to update the general ledger, anything that's going to update anything that's tied to a general ledger subsidiary, we recommend running at a minimum this list of reports in detail and in summary, but in detail is important. Out to a file or out to email or both, whatever works for you. Hard copy is probably the least attractive because it's you know, easy to lose. You can, but it's easy to lose it that way. So it's the AP aging report and the trial balances and everything like that. And I usually recommend, if people are running these out to a file, prefixing the name with the fiscal year. This way you've got 2020 all grouped together, 2021, 2019, and it's a lot easier to find that way than hunting and pecking for the acronym of however you save the report. It's just one of many ways that people use to try to put that information into a way that's easy for them to find going forward in the future. So it's really it doesn't matter when you run them, but it's a really good idea to do it before people start doing anything that's going to update the general ledger, the accounts receivable, the AP subledgers, any of that kind of thing in the new year. And you can set these up as stored reports to kick off automatically, so you don't have to babysit them. You know, and the confirmation would obviously be that you received the report in the email. That would be your way of knowing, yes, it actually happened, so that you could be comfortable to release people to actually start posting transactions in the system. So now let's talk about something that is an often asked question, especially when people are newer to the system. And that is the difference of a soft close versus a hard close. So year end, just as month end in SX.e, is a soft close. By that I mean, depending on the way you've got your administrator options set, it's just the next day. That's it. It's just the next day. It doesn't, the system doesn't have anything that prevents you from, continuing to post transactions into the past unless you set the administrator options in such a way as that. And again, for people who are used to SX.e, you realize that, but if you're newer to the system, this is new information. So it's a soft close, which means you do the next day is just the next day, and you continue posting into the new period and into the period prior, depending on how the administrator options have been set. Backdating journal entries is controlled by the administrator options financial period structure and the first valid and last valid period. So the first period and the periods backward, which allows users to back post within boundaries. We're going to take a look at what those look like, but I want to continue to talk through the concept. So here's an example. So over here, the screenshot shows you the financials period structure, which is an administrator option. So administrator option financials period structure. And in here, you've got multiple boxes. You have default period, first valid period, last valid, track balancing history, periods forward, periods backward, and current period only. Current period only, you would check that box if people are not allowed to post forward or backward, only into the current period. Periods forward allows you to post into the future up to however far this last valid period is, or whatever your year end is. Like if I had tried to post into 12 periods forward a few minutes ago before I ran that year end, I wouldn't have been able to because the chart of accounts didn't exist in 2021. I can't post beyond 2021 right now because the chart of accounts doesn't exist beyond that. So that's something to be aware of. The periods forward would control how far into the future I post with the limit of last valid period and whatever my year-end process was. Periods backward works in conjunction with first valid period. I can post back, in this case, one period up to period 120. Well, right now I'm in November. I can only back post into October. So this is sort of like a whichever is the least. So first valid period or periods backward, whichever is least. So in this example, I can only back post one period, and I'm in November right now. I can only back post into October. In the second example, I can back post up to 12 periods because periods backward says 12, but I cannot post into 12/2019 because the first valid period of January 20 is a hard stop, or period 120, if I'm in a fiscal year, is a hard stop. Backdating journals. So for those of you who have dealt with this, this is a very frustrating thing to be aware of. The posting date should be within the date range of the posting period. So for example, if fiscal period 12/20 equals December of 2020, the posting dates should be 12/1 to 12/31/20. They should be within the range of whatever that period actually should be, not today's date or whatever the date is that happens to default. So I'm showing you an example where the user's backdating, so they're posting back into 12/20, but they're using a posting date of 1/4/21 because they forgot to change the default. So what happens? Well, you'll get this, what I call a soft stop. You get a pop-up warning. The posting date and posted period do not match. Do you wish to continue? And notice it defaults to yes. So I could hit enter and blow right past it, or I can click on yes. And it will allow me to do this. Now, we'll talk in a minute about when this might actually be a legitimate pop-up that's not a problem and you can bypass it. But ordinarily, you don't want users to do this because then the fiscal period and the posting dates will not be aligned. Well, okay, Kathy, aside from the fact that you're very controlling, what's the issue with that? Here's an issue. Running as of reports. I'm not sure, because I've got everybody on mute right now, but when we take you off of mute, who all want, so I had mentioned a couple slides ago to run your reports out to file for year end for all of your subsidiary ledgers. But you're also going to probably be back posting. Would we, is that best practices? That depends. For general journal, yes, you have to back post, because there will be a few journal entries that you've got to do to close out your months, to close out your year. Should you be posting payables and receivables and those sorts of things back posting? Generally, no, but a lot of companies do. So recognizing that, you should be able to run certain reports as of. So let's say I'm in, I don't know, I'm in February, and the auditors are here, and they want to see my my trial balance, and they say, okay, your accounts receivable is 3 million. Now, where's your aging report? Well, you show them the aging report that you printed out in on 12/31. It's probably not going to agree, because you've probably done some back posting. You go to run your as of report, saying, oh, well, I have this as of feature in my AR aging and my AP aging and my trial balances as of yes, as of date. And then you're not getting the results that you're looking for. A lot of times that's because somebody may have backdated the period, but they didn't do that date. So that date that we're talking about, this ever important posting date, those as ofs are backing out transactions based on the posting date, not the period. So if somebody posted back incorrectly, then your as of is not going to work, and you're going to end up having to do a reconciliation of that to be able to produce a report that says, okay, these are the transactions that fell out, and this is why. We can explain it, we can prove it. Any questions on that? Anybody run into issues with your as of reports? And remember, you can type your questions and comments in the chat box, because right now we've got everybody muted so that we have no background noise. So now let's talk about back posting from my perspective. So to hard close a prior period or year, you would change the administrator option first valid period flag. So we'll take a look at what that looks like. And again, don't be thrown off if you're not on CSD or WebUI. It's the same process in GUI and in character. So we'll get into administrator options and financials and period structure. And to hard close, you would change this first valid period and say, so that would be your hard close. People can't back post beyond that. So if I want to say people are not allowed into 2020 or my fiscal period, my fiscal year 20, I would change this first valid period to 0121, and that would be the hard close. People cannot back post beyond that. And now let's talk about the fact that that is not controlled by user. So this is, to me, this is something that is an absolute necessity. We need to have this in the system. We've done this as a modification for some users, but it's not a universal. There is no option to control back posting by user. Today, that back posting flag is for all modules, all users. So it's open or it's closed. And what happens inevitably? Somebody who wasn't supposed to back posted while accounting was working on just getting their month end or their year end done. Or even worse, accounting is having to come in after hours when nobody's on the system, working on weekends to try to get those entries in while somebody's flipping those administrator option flags back and forth. I would really appreciate if, for your sake as well as for the sake of other customers, you could go and endorse this ERS. It's 63680, and I'm actually going to type that in the chat box too. ERS 63680, and that will allow us to change this for to be a list of specific users that are allowed to back post and close everybody out, so that only accounting, and again, there should be an administrator flag to say whether or not a company wants to use this, but so that you can have a setting that determines who's allowed to back post. All right. So next, we want to talk about best practices as far as your suspense accounts. This one has proven to be a little bit of an area of indigestion, is when you get suspense accounts hits. So suspense accounts are what the system uses to keep itself in balance. So why does something hit suspense accounts? Normally, it is because a general ledger integration is missing. Say somebody has set up a new product category and forgot to tell accounting. So accounting did not have an opportunity to set up the general ledger integrations in ICAAY, for example, to set up if you're integrating the sales to general ledger by product category. Or somebody set up a new sales tax, or somebody set up a new order entry add-on, but they didn't tell accounting, so the general ledger account is missing. That's one reason. Another reason could be that something, went wrong. There could be a bug. There may be a problem with custom code. So you want to know about it and address it pretty much as soon as you find out that it happens. This isn't one of those wait and see. We usually recommend that folks actually turn on the event in Event Manager to get notified. So get an email when something's hit suspense so you can jump on it. Because accounting is not just going to want to reclass the journal entry and say, well, that shouldn't have hit suspense. It should have hit whatever this other general ledger account is. But you want to analyze it for root cause and get to the bottom of it so it doesn't continue to happen. There have been rare cases where I've seen a ton of suspense entries get hit because, God bless them, somebody new starts as a system administrator, sees the R&D operator, doesn't know what that is, and deletes it. And for those of you who are not aware, the R&D operator is where the big bulk of your general ledger integrations are set up. That is a system-wide operator that's used for general ledger integrations only. And if somebody deletes that, you're going to get suspense hits all over the place. We recommend getting that accounting should have a copy of what those general ledger integrations are. That is set up in SASO operator security. So get a copy of what the R&D operator general ledger accounts are, just in case anybody ever deletes it. It's quite a headache to try to put that back together. All you have to do is set the R&D operator back up again and plug in those general ledger accounts. But if accounting doesn't know where that's coming from, it's a real headache to start getting hit with those suspense accounts because somebody accidentally deleted the R&D operator. So you analyze the journal or journals that cause a suspense hit for root cause, and you reclass it, because a suspense balance is not an asset, liability, income, or expense. It's an unclassified, so it doesn't really belong any place. You need to journal it out as soon as something hits there. And if you haven't done it the same day, then you definitely want to do it at the end of the month. And if you haven't done it at the end of the month, you definitely want to do it by year end if you want to produce balanced income statement balance sheet. So balancing to the general ledger, there are multiple reports within SX.e that balance your balance sheet control account to a subsidiary ledger that has all of the details of that balance. So this is the list of what those accounts are. So your accounts payable trial balance, AR, which will list all of the customers that owe you and should tie to the general ledger AR control account. The general ledger report for AP invoices that have been received without a purchase order being received. The sales orders with down payments for tendering, purchase orders received that have not been vouchered, your general ledger trial balance, your inventory in transit, so that's stock that's being warehouse transferred from warehouse A to warehouse B, but it's not at either location. So this is the ledger that keeps track of the details of that. Your inventory trial balance, your non-stock inventory trial balance, your direct ship inventory trial balance, so you can see what orders customers are supposed to have drop ship goods go to them to, that ties to your general ledger. If you're using the in-system rebates, then your rebates due. And if you're using the value add module, then your WIP inventory for value add. Okay, and then I'll say last but not least on this is the manual journal entry. So your final, just so you know, I took everybody off of mute. Your final entry for the year is, maybe that was a mistake. I better mute it again. Your final entry for the year is to manually book your current year earnings to your retained earnings, and not to rerun a process that you've been running on a monthly basis called GLAP, or General Ledger Post Profit. So on a monthly basis, you're posting your profit and you're running your GLAP, and then the final entry that you do to close out a year is to move the earnings out of your current year earnings account to your retained earnings account. Do not rerun the GLAP after that. If you run into any issues or questions with your year end, or trying to post into a greater than one fiscal year back or into a closed year, just reach out and contact us, and we'll be happy to walk you through that process. There's also, for those of you who would like more detail, so screenshots of before and after, and walking through what we walked through on this PowerPoint, there's a white paper that we have called Accounting Processes Year-End CSD. We also have one for month-end that walks through the details of this. And I'm going to open it up for questions, but I'll also show you what the white paper looks like. So, white paper looks something like this. It's white. There you go. So this gets into much more detail of what we've walked through on a, I would say, a high level going through this for year end, and we also have a white paper for month end process. So we open it up for questions. If you have any questions that you want to ask out loud or put in the chat box besides the ones we've gone through. All right.
You will send the presentation by email. The recording of it.
Yes, we for everybody who's registered, we send a link for the presentation, and for anybody who wants a copy of the presentation, not the white paper, email me. I will also type my email address into the chat box.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm going to stop the recording now.